So at your emotional baseline, think about that as like kind of how you typically are in the world. How much time are you spending feeling like you're in trouble? That someone might be mad at you, that you might have done something wrong that you're not aware of, which is just the worst. You can think about that as like hypervigilance. Do you maybe have dreams rooted in anxiety about being found out about something, like with imposter syndrome? It's a very particular feeling, and a lot of us feel it all the time in our subconscious, and that kind of runs us. It's actually pretty common for childhood trauma survivors to perpetually feel like they're in trouble in the world, and not acutely in trouble all the time, just it's something in the background, like at our baseline. Let's look into it. I think the feeling of being in trouble is the anticipation that we're going to be shamed by someone for messing something up. You might walk into like a brand new job, and your inner child is anxious and starts to wonder if you forgot to get HR some important paperwork or something, and they're going to be upset with you right out of the gates on the first day. Feeling that you're in trouble can also be seen as like a coping strategy for childhood trauma survivors. It's almost like how we might deal with the unknown in the world is the assumption that we're in trouble. Shame, which is a basic human emotion, I think gets really amped up when you grow up in things like abuse or toxicity or with emotionally immature parents. And I often say the opposite of shame is integrity. How much your emotional awareness or your triggers or your upset is rooted about your integrity, your goodness as a person in the world that is now on the line in your subconscious, thinking about you're in trouble all the time, if that makes sense. So hypervigilance, fueled by this shame, kind of signals that there's a disconnect with a person who might have power over us. Think about that, like in terms of healthy conflict. Healthy conflict is about seeking connection, where toxic shame is about seeking punishment. So that may have been true for you growing up, but we're anticipating that in the present, like with a boss, like with a partner, like with a friend. Were you ever punished or shut out as a child, like I was? And instead of seeking reconnection through communication and seeking understanding, in the abusive family system, they're going to use their power to persecute us and avoid being real about the situation or taking ownership for their feelings. What do I mean by that? I grew up with parents who really played up. Basic parenting stress was due to the kids doing things to them, that we were selfish, that we weren't thoughtful enough, that we ruined everything in their life. And all of that wasn't true. But part of abusive parenting is feeling victimized by having children while not protecting children from accumulating too much shame. So let's complicate that a little bit. What happens when kids grow up feeling like they are wrong or that they're a burden? When those kids become adults and we grow up and we find ourselves in relationships like with a boss or a partner or with a friend, we again will find people or end up with people who are maybe moody or prickly, or even not, they're fine, but we automatically assume from the inner child that we're again burdening them and we're going to be in trouble. It's really triggering to be in a situation like that as an adult. And because of the emotional body memories of feeling like we're in trouble, which we haven't processed yet, those feelings can be so strong. So think about that feeling of being in trouble as free-floating, as kind of indiscriminate, or rooted in toxic relationships. Think about that feeling in your body saying, like with a moody partner or a prickly boss or a friend, or with someone who isn't even mad at us or any of those things, the body is saying, it's happening again. I am in trouble, and let me find out why I'm in trouble. And if you don't know me, I'm Patrick. I'm a childhood trauma survivor. I'm an MSW, and I'm an educator on childhood trauma. Go ahead and hit the like button if you're already resonating with this. Subscribe to the channel to get more videos like this and information on resources and live events. So let's figure out what exactly our body is saying when we have that feeling like it's happening again and we become hypervigilant. What might being in trouble have looked like for you in your childhood? Maybe it looked like making a misstep as a child, and that brought on violence or an emotionally violent reaction from a parent, just making a mistake. Or maybe the parents made extremely poor choices and crossed boundaries in their lives, and you vowed to never do that. And if you were ever like that, that would mean that you were in trouble. Or maybe that you were the scapegoat, where a sibling was a golden child and you were the problem child, meaning you were effectively in trouble just by existing. Maybe you were blamed or you had to answer for things like in parentification. Maybe you had a parent who was looking for reasons for you to be in trouble and to be hateful towards you. So relaxing mentally and physically is not possible. You might drop the ball and you might break a forgotten rule, resulting in a disaster with somebody, and that results in an attachment rupture, like you're fired, the person breaks up with you, or they say you're horrible. Again, you're a bad kid. All of a sudden, raise your hand in the comment if the type of stuff that happened to you in your family system of origin was like all of a sudden you were terrible. It really takes a toll on our nervous system, and it's why you probably clicked on this video. Put a shoe in the comment if you're waiting for the other shoe to drop kind of thing that I'm kind of talking about. And incidentally, one of the biggest parts to my trauma to overcome was reclaiming the ability to turn things off and relax. Hypervigilance doesn't like relaxation because it can't scan if you're relaxed. It's trying to do its job. It's trying to protect you. And that makes relaxing and chilling out not possible. And especially with the way the world is right now, that is greatly amplified. But even if the world wasn't the state that it is right now, childhood trauma survivors really have a hard time relaxing, going on vacation and being present because hypervigilant is like, no, we got to figure out how we're in trouble, or for other reasons as well. If you do these things today, remember they are not your character flaws. These are high-level survival skills that you learned as a child to stay safe. And now let's talk a little bit about how children start responding to some potential disasters that happened in our family, where all of a sudden you were the worst kid on the planet and you were in trouble, or something else happened. You might go into fawning as a kid, and as adults, we might give away all of our power because we still fawn. We might go into self-doubt and self-neglect. We might even go into a fight mode and start acting out because it's like, you're not going to tell me I'm in trouble again. That's still kind of the same hypervigilance about being in trouble. We might shut down. We might become perfect because we were parentified. These are all important and valuable ways that our inner children learn to survive the really debilitating shame directed at us by parents, by a shaming or emotionally violent parent. So it's important to be able to validate to our inner child that they did a really good job surviving those experiences and that they're heroic for figuring out a way to get through it. The way we dealt with it isn't something to be ashamed of. It is something that kept us going. Here are some journal prompts to begin exploring how our inner children relate to the dynamic of feeling like you're in trouble, and how you might help them grieve those experiences and allow to start making some different awareness of being in the world. So here's the first journal prompt. There's going to be 3 of these things. So journal prompt number 1 is simply what I'm calling what happened. Part A, write out situations and dynamics from your childhood that contribute to the lasting feeling that you're feeling like you're in trouble. Some examples: my parents' shameful behavior made me feel like I was in trouble, or constantly being reminded that I was a burden, it made me feel like I was in trouble, or I was screamed at as the oldest child for not being a perfect stand-in other parent for my stressed out parent, parentification. So that's part A, to write out those experiences. Part B, related to what we just sort of said, is that how did you deal with it? How did you cope with that? Did you maybe become a people pleaser because of those dynamics? Did you start to hate the oppressor or start to hate yourself? Did you maybe try to develop a perfect persona and kind of wing it through life? Did you take on the story that you were a burden or that you had no common sense, is what toxic families often like to talk about? So that's the first journal prompt. Part A is to write out those situations about what happened. And part B is to kind of think about like, well, how did I deal with that? What was my strategy as a child to deal with that? It is most likely stuff that you still struggle with as an adult. Journal prompt number 2 is called talking back. How to talk back. Ask your inner child. This is all journaling on paper with this stuff. Ask your inner child how they felt about being in trouble in those situations. What did they feel like they were afraid of? Was there anything they felt really sad about in those moments? What would happen if instead of someone else being angry at them, that they were allowed to be angry. What I mean by that is to ask your inner child, what would happen if we actually talked back when we were told that we were a burden? What would happen if we talked back about being the oldest child and being parentified? What would happen if we were the scapegoat? What would happen if we talked back? What could both your inner adult and your inner child say together, metaphorically, to the abusive parent? How could you tell them, the abusive parent, the truth? Not in person, but again, metaphorically. Some examples, you're writing this down as a message to the abusive parent in your journal. You don't have any power over me anymore. A message coming from both the inner child and the inner adult. Another example is, you set me up to apologize for just existing and just breathing. Another statement might be directed at the parent. You wrecked mistakes for me and you weaponized them. Another statement might be, you were more interested in making me feel terrible than making me feel loved. Another example might be, I'm not going to live in fear of making mistakes anymore or being in trouble anymore. I'm giving that back to you. You can have it. Now let's move on to the third journal prompt, what I'm calling parental accountability, metaphorically again. Here is part A. What kinds of situations are still able to make you feel like you're in trouble as an adult? List some examples from, say, your past in your adult life, and some might be quite maybe even recent to you. Do you feel like you're in trouble over an email exchange? Do you feel like you're in trouble when you state a preference? I know I don't want to get Thai food tonight. Do you feel like you're in trouble when you have a bump with a partner or a friend? Do you feel like having a pet that is noisy in your apartment building puts you in trouble with your neighbors, even though they've never addressed it with you or stuff like that? So what are the experiences in your adult life that still trigger you to feeling like you're in trouble? Try to avoid the kind of stuff that is like the state of the world, and just think historically in your adult life. I'm not sort of saying the state of the world isn't a problem, but that's going to be, it's almost like the state of the world is so bad that we all feel like we're in trouble. So that's what I mean by that. So that's part A. What are the situations that you typically feel like you're in trouble with? And part B to this is, can you take the statements in the journal prompt number 2, which was talking back? Remember those statements like, you set me up. Can you apply them to the triggers that you're naming in the present? Say you have to call in sick to work, or you have to reschedule something with a friend, and you feel a shadowy feeling like they're going to be disappointed in you, or worse, that they're mad at you, and you are again in trouble. Can you, instead of just sitting on that trigger, feeling like you're in trouble, and write out what you would say to the abusive parent who installed this programming of feeling like you're in trouble? In short, can you stand up for your inner child when you're triggered, instead of continuing the hypervigilance seeking to confirm that you're in trouble or being bad when you're actually not? So those statements, you set me up for this, they're very helpful in real time when you're triggered in the present around feeling like you're in trouble. Like, let's just say you have a very moody partner, or they're shut down, or they're going through something, or they're not even that moody, and your kid, your inner child, feels like you're in trouble with them. That's when you use those statements to come back to the present and start to battle those conditioning. Okay, so some final thoughts to this one. So my mentor, Amanda Curtin, would often discuss how we left our bodies as children when we weren't safe, how we stopped being present really early because we became hypervigilant about what the adults were doing and saying. We were in trouble as kids. We were told that we weren't doing enough and we were a burden, and we would create a disaster just lurking around the corner for these stressed out parents who weren't good to us. So that lasting feeling in you makes sense. It makes sense to me. But it's all bullshit. Our conditioning is just that. It's just conditioning. When we look at our childhood trauma through these videos or whatever, it's not just to understand it, but to start reclaiming being more present, reclaiming many things, whether that's sort of feeling like we're innocent, to feeling like we can be healthy sexual beings, lots of reclaiming. But related to this video, can you reclaim 2 things and commit to reclaiming them? One is, when you feel like you're in trouble, put that feeling back on the abusive family, like I mentioned with those statements. And the second thing is to start to live in the conscious reality that you're not in trouble, that it's just a lie, and that it was a coping strategy that kept you safe. The beginning of this is starting to play around with being in the world from a very different place. Like, try not to assume that you're in trouble, assume that you're good enough, and you kind of have some anonymity, meaning that no one is thinking bad about you, whether that's a stranger or a boss or a friend or a partner. But again, the inner child doesn't know that. And it's your job to help them see that they're innocent and they have some safety and they have some anonymity when it comes to that baseline thing that I mentioned earlier. If you found this helpful, the full version of these journal prompts are in a workbook that I created in 2025 of essential childhood trauma journal prompts. You can find it somewhere in a bubble up here in the description of this video. And in that workbook are 12 other chapters on issues like this one in this video that we covered today. So thank you for staying with me. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you identify with that feeling of being in trouble, or if you just sort of appreciate this video, put a shoe in the comments, like the waiting for the other shoe to drop kind of a thing, just to bookmark it and build a bit of community around that. And as always, may you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well, may you be peaceful entities, and may you be joyous. And I will see you next time. Thank you.